Welcome, 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 welcome. It's nice to see everybody here. Thank you for coming to the 5th annual East Portland Arts and Literary Festival, this year known as EPALF. And I'm very excited that you're here and that we're going to start Spatial Realities, the Lunchtime Art Series with Meenakshi Thirukode. So I'm going to share my screen and give a little intro. Can everybody see that? Great. So welcome. My name is Jasmine Thirukode. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Apano Cultural Work Coordinator. I have been working with a really rad collective of artists and cultural workers in Portland, including Jasmine Thirukode, who is an AMP member and the series curator who's joining us today. We also have Misha Belden. They use they, them pronouns, and they are the Apano Welcome Desk and Event Coordinator and Tech Assistants for the program today. And then we have our guest artist, Meenakshi Thirukode. She uses she, her pronouns, and very exciting to have her here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over some community agreements of what we expect in the space today. And so just note that this is a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color centered space. So just please be cognizant of that. We want you to take care of yourself. We are here to connect, but be attentive to your body. If you're talking or anything during the Q&A or anything, just make sure that one person speaks at a time. And also just to make sure that take space and make space. So be mindful of how much you speak and please leave space for others to speak. The stories stay, but the lessons can be shared. If there are any stories that pop up that you hear in today's program, just please keep in mind that this space is confidential and when the stories are being shared. Respect each other, pretty basic, but no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. And feel free to share gratitude and feedback. Things might come up where, that might feel complicated. So we're just gonna accept non-closure. Not everything has to be clearly defined. So that's just part of the way that we do things. We want to create a space for multiple truths and embrace curiosity. And some technical things, if you are not speaking, please mute yourself. If you need tech assistance or anything with Zoom, do not hesitate to reach out. You can DM Misha, who has the username tech. And then we are recording the session so that we can share it with the rest of the world. And if you're not interested in this being recorded, you can turn your camera off if that's what you prefer. And then if you would like closed captioning, it should be turned on and you should have a little live transcript at the bottom of your screen. So you should be able to turn that on. If you need assistance with that, just message Misha. And then we have, let's see. I just want to share some other things. Knowing that we are all on stolen land, I want to just share the land acknowledgement even in the digital sphere. And so since our activities are shared digitally on the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, the structures, and the ways of thinking we use every day. So we're using high equipment and high-speed internet, not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art that we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. And so that quote is from Adrienne Wong of the Spiderweb Show. And so in addition, since we are zooming in from Oregon, we are currently seated on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Katlamet, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Wascow, Cowlitz, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. So I invite you to join us in acknowledging all of the above as our shared responsibility to make good use of this time and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and accomplishment. And then we also wanted to acknowledge the statement of solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter every day, past, present, and future. So we also want to acknowledge that our society has deeply rooted within its centuries of white supremacy economies built on the enslavement, the disproportionate imprisonment of Black folks, violation of human and civil rights, and the concentration of extreme wealth into the hands of a small, mostly white male elite power structure. So we explicitly name anti-Blackness as the root of most oppression and racism. We believe this will allow us to be better equipped to dismantle harmful structures and institutions that we are working with and within. And so this is from an old colleague of Apano's, Jairesh Singh, who's a really amazing, badass organizer. So with that, I invite y'all to change your name and add your pronouns. You can click to set it up. You can click at the top of your screen where you see participants and then hit more. And then you can just rename yourself with your name and pronouns. And I think that's it for me. Really excited that you're here, and I'm going to hand it over to our series curator and awesome AMP member, Jasmine Thirukode. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I think we have new people coming in, so this is super exciting. I'm just going to jump straight into it and introduce amazing Meenakshi Thirukode. But again, I super appreciate that you all are taking time out during lunch hour and doing this, especially on a Friday afternoon. So again, thank you so much. You know, when I sort of like was thinking of who are the people who triangulate with each other, this is a 3-part series, and I was thinking a lot about spatial realities for queer people and how within Black feminist praxis, we can sort of like think through collectivity. So we have Meenakshi here. After this, we have Romy Morrison, and then we have Ariel Attai. So I'm super excited for all of these people to be here. I'm going to just introduce Meenakshi really quickly. Meenakshi is a writer, researcher, educator, and a feminist killjoy, the recipient of 2016-17 Fika Inlex Goldsmith Scholar at MRES program in curatorial knowledge, Goldsmith, University of London. Meenakshi also graduated with honors in MA of History of the Art Market, Cornership, and Art Criticism from Christie Education in New York, 2008 and 2009. Her areas of research include the role of culture and collectivity from the point of view of a queer femme subjectivity that's located within the realm of transnomadic, transient network of individuals and institutions. She runs the School of I/O, which is a space of unlearning dedicated to navigating study as a radical tool of political agency. Her recent projects include disorganizing metabolisms with Food Art Research Network, the Here, There, and Everywhere conference at MAC Birmingham, UK in March of 2018, and Out of Turn, Being Together Otherwise, exploring the performance of art histories in collaboration with Asia Art Archive at Serendipity Arts Festival in Goa, India in December 2018. Her chapter Towards a Public of the Otherwise was published in Routledge, a companion series of art in the public realm in 2020. She is actually a resident right now at Stroom Den Hagen Hague this October as a part of Weezing residency program. I'm going to give it to Meenakshi now. Thank you so much, Meenakshi.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Garima, thank you, Roshni, and thank you so much, Misha. And I hope everyone can hear me all right. I think I'll just share my screen and let me know if this looks okay. Can you? Is that visible to everybody? Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll just get right into it, I guess. So one of the things that I often do when I speak about my practice is that I revisit a lot of what I've done, because it kind of informs where I am right now. And to guide me through that, often I have lived my life and made work in a very intuitive way. And it sounds, I mean, how do you speak about intuition, and how do you speak about like things that you do from your heart, and something that like moves you and shakes you constantly to like challenge yourself? And I think oftentimes as a writer and someone who's interested in, I'm actually on a reading residency, so I spend an awful lot of time with theory, but I've come to theory in a sort of post way. I mean, after I've done, projects, or after I've sort of thought through things in relation to the people that I share space with. And that space is something I'll talk a little bit to as we kind of go a little further into the presentation. But I speak mostly to the idea of micropolitics and how they exist within a lot of interpersonal relationships, particularly friendships and your peers, family, chosen family. And I've kind of chosen a few excerpts to kind of create a framework into how I'd speak about like work I've done. I am a product pretty much of the system. I've had access to higher education. I come from an upper class family, and education is prioritized, and it's just generational access really to a lot of what I've had a chance to encounter and think through. So I work from that positionality. And one of the things I also wanted to say is that there will be references to sexual assault, sexual harassment, and also suicide going further in the presentation. So I just wanted to ensure that everyone was aware of that before I start to speak. So I just titled this On Being Together Otherwise, a Call for Radical Refusal. So what does it mean for me to have had, 2 masters, access to scholarships and fellowships, and also to have actually started my work at a gallery, studied at an auction house, and then to sort of be at a space where I have I talk about an instituting otherwise, which is, of course, a term taken from a lot of different kind of theoretical underpinnings, really, which I'll get into as well. So I think of myself and my work as a series of radical refusals. So maybe like a few little excerpts to just read through. One of the things that I function, of course, that a lot of us function, is a space of heightened uncertainty. This is something that Chintamana has often spoken about, and I'm interested in this idea of a shifting of grounds, an experience of limits, right? An unknown point of arrival. Work here is a gift. It succeeds if it takes you to a place that is elsewhere from where it began. And I'm interested in the transformative potential of an artwork, of the way we see, of the ways we're seeing them and experiencing them. And most importantly, I think she speaks of the market. And for me, this was a really, really important revelation. It's from her lecture Between Dog and Wolf. And having actually had an education in the auction house, Christie's, the master's program there, this is sort of what I kind of, took from that experience, which is of the hostility of the market in wanting to know intentions and preconceived notions, which has a limited role in the process. But it is in the impasses, the blind procedures, the happy accidents, unwanted discoveries, the time wasted, the useless moves, the responses generated by one's wishes and known to self, but unforeseeable to performers and the viewers, of always knowing what was intended, even if it doesn't manifest, that a potential lies. And I think this has been, again, really powerful in underpinning some of the ways in which I've approached my practice, the ways in which I chose not to think about intention or preconceived notions. And I'm sharing these texts mostly because it helps me articulate things that I feel, which I then don't really know words to use, and then I've been coming to texts that help me. So it's similarly, one of the places that I've often functioned is to always be, I said, like, uncertainty brings the sense of not having something. And I've been interested in the position of the without. So there's this really interesting conversation between Peggy Phelan and Irit Rogov. And I relate a lot to the idea of the without. How do you kind of change this perspective where without becomes a space of potential, right? So the notion of without is a very productive one because it intimates process rather than method and alludes to a condition in which you find yourself while doing work. So the notion of being without is not one of being at a loss, of inhabiting a lack, of not having anything, but rather an active daily association in the attempt to clear ground for something new to emerge. And I think newness, not so much in the sort of neoliberal, like, producing something that's constantly supposed to give you this idea of having discovered something that doesn't exist. But I think it's this idea of not feeling like the kind of consequences of this disease called capitalism, right? How do we counter that? And I think these are ways to think through that. And another really important strategy within this idea of radical refusals is our vulnerable stories. This is something Nora Khan, who was involved with dark study, it said the clues to how one reaches study are in our own vulnerable stories. And so the work that I do when I sort of say what I do is School of Instituting Otherwise, or Instituting Otherwise is my practice. It's really just a very, it's kind of like tentacular, it's intuitive. So it's not really that a physical structure exists or that, there's stuff that I could put into a CV or explain in a bio. I know Garima kind of described a lot of things that I'm involved with, but that's like a certain life that I do have to lead in order to be legible, but I'm really interested in that idea of instituting otherwise as illegibility, right? To be opaque in a certain sense. And so when I use these texts and when I'm pointing out to certain some of these words like the vulnerable story or the without, those are just kind of ways in which to enter possibly the kind of ideas and thinking that I'm currently sort of grappling with and still kind of trying to articulate. And I think this is something that I kind of came across, which also led me therefore to the idea of micropolitics. How do you talk about a micropolitics which exists in interpersonal relationships? Because I think that's the space that I'm most interested in confronting and questioning, healing, And so this is from The Queer Art of Failure, and where Jack Halberstam talks about, which really resonated, which is that I believe in low theory, and low theory is also a tool within radical refusals. Low theory in popular places, in the small, the inconsequential, the anti-monumental, the micro, the irrelevant. I believe in making a difference by thinking little thoughts and sharing them widely. I seek to provoke, to annoy, bother, irritate, and amuse. I am chasing small projects, micropolitics, hunches, whims, and fancies. So yeah, I mean, and if these were a few little, entry points into my way of constructing like something of a practice to which I invite a lot of different collaborators and a lot of different communities that I participate in or involve myself in, then friendships are a really important aspect of like the interpersonal that it's hard to talk about, because I know that presentations often speak about like a project, and nothing that I'm doing now is necessarily a project. It's mostly things that are outside of that framework. And I think I look back at my first encounter with that when I was a student in New York, and I was part of the South Asian Women's Creative Collective. And this is a picture of us at the birthday of one of the founders, Jayashree Chandani, and Roshni was also someone who passed through. Saucy, I was involved in the kind of coming together and participating. And I think it was the first time that I encountered women, those who identified as women and who looked like me in New York, really actually building community, not just in terms of the projects and the shows that were made, but also in actually helping me navigate my own sense of self and the things, the baggages of a kind of Brahminical patriarchy that I kind of exported from India and brought to New York. Then how do you navigate the idea of brownness, which I think is quite contentious in a political sense. And I think it was simply in the way that Jayashree opened the doors and sort of said, here's everything that you need, in order to like be whatever you want, an artist or a curator, like, or, what you need to do to get a visa. Like those were the interactions that were most sort of valuable to me. And these kind of more than the projects. And I think I learned that from this particular participation within that collective. But my role really at that point in New York was also to be a gallery manager that then kind of became a curator. I literally was probably one of those first generation of curators before the figure of the independent curator kind of came about. And so I just really kind of took from, I don't know, I was just responding a lot to my own position and how I was perceived in the context of like a New York art world. And so the space that I could really interact with was really the gallery. And one of the shows that I was asked to then curate for this gallery that worked with South Asian artists was who only showed South Asian artists, which means you sort of you played to that identity politics, which can be, I think, limiting as well in a certain way. And there was this, of course, the priority was the market. And what I did in this show was to invite 3 artists to come into the space and just do whatever they wanted to for a month, and respond to the space, respond to each other. And I had conversations which I was recording with them. And of the 3 artists, there was Alexander Singh, there was Sarah Hardesty, and of course there was Fawad Khan. And Sarah and Fawad actually did shift their practice a little bit. Like, there was I think the moment here that was most important for me was not really the actual show, but the interaction between the gallerist, the artist, and the curator. And for me, that intuitively became a way of really looking at how all of us interacted, which never really translated into the show. It's not like an audience could come and really get an insight into how we interacted, but it was definitely in the friction and the tension and the friendship or the camaraderie between all of us that actually eventually I was interested in. So just for the sake of time, of course, there was one meeting that the gallerist and the artist and the curator had, which was me. And the gallerist insisted, this was when we were drawing up contracts, and she just said that, I don't really care what you do, but whatever you make in this space in the 1 month, you're going to have to produce something that can be sold. And so what Fawad did was, well, I usually paint murals on the wall, but I'm going to make this on, mylar, or I'm going to change what material I'm going to use. And it was similar with Sarah, but it was actually Alexander who just got really pissed off and was like, I'm not really gonna, make anything that is sellable. And then he just sort of set up his studio and he was just working on a film that he was going to make eventually. And it really, really upset the gallerist. And there was a lot of tension between her and me, and, catalogs didn't get made, or which was promised, because so it was this whole sense of that friction that, in some ways, it was a reflection of how the system actually works, but you get to see something entirely different in when you just walk into the gallery, right? You don't really see what actually exists between the individuals who operate. And eventually, this particular image is where I'd been transcribing my conversations, and Alex, who had been using different colored tapes and demarcating spaces, and he said that each color represents different individuals in the space, and I was supposed to be red. And that little white rectangle that you see, the red tape, it actually had the logo of the gallery, and he just put the red tape around it. And it really upset like the gallerist, because she felt like it was, mocking the logo, like the brand of the gallery. Like, and I had all my transcripts up there on the wall as well for people to read, like my, the conversations I had like over the month and a half. But yeah, it was great. I mean, I still got to keep my job. I just had to do 2 more shows that pissed the gallerist off, and then I wasn't working there anymore. So, but another project that I always kept talking about these projects is something I did on the side, So there's the gallery job, and of course I needed that job because I also, was a working living artist in New York, so I need to pay rents and and just daily living. So there was also I just assumed that of course that's just going to happen, and if I work within the institution like a gallery, and on the side I could actually do something that is really what I'm drawn towards, which was what I think, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's a project that's kind of expanded and grown since I left New York, which is a project for empty space. And it was Jasmine Wooley and we were just walking down the street. We were just like, we should use public spaces. And so we found this space in the Lower East Side and took out a lease from the housing department for $100. And then we just said, let's put out an open call. Let's have artists come in here. It was space. It was a neighborhood that actually there was the bodega, there were lots of schools. And so it was, this is something that was just what I was drawn to, like this space that was just invisible, but visible, these vacant lots. And also this kind of, this was a lot where you found like needles and graffiti, and like there was some sense of like, but we can't actually use the space to, build anything because of whatever, problems existed that the housing department couldn't then lease it out to anyone else. But we used it for a certain amount of time, and we worked with the community. It's become a garden now that like they use. But I think I mean, this was sort of an entry into this idea of public space and, how and in what ways do artists use that? What is our responsibility? Because it was, I mean, one of the things that we didn't want to do was to just sort of bring in the art and then leave. And so there was this, it was probably the first time that, there was that need to work and really think about what those who lived around there wanted the space to be and how we could enable that. But Project for Empty Space was also, it's a bit of like a bitter love story or something, because it also taught me what it meant to let go of something. Because for me as an immigrant, not being able to keep my visa, there was all of this labor that kind of went into setting this up, but I had to step back in a certain sense from the project because I couldn't really stay back. And then, that stepping back also allowed for the project to expand and grow and become more than what I had imagined it to be. And so from that kind of letting go, so it was a radical refusal of my ego to be attached to something just because I imagined it together with someone. And another thing that I did, that was the last year that I was in New York, and one of the spaces that I really wanted to explore, because I have a background in film and theater, is I actually was involved with making this soap opera of a New York, a young immigrant woman's journey through the New York art world. And this was around when I was around Bushwick, and I had a lot of, it was around 2012, 2013. And just sort of wrote a script based on my experiences of working and navigating through the art world there, and right from the auction house to the gallery to just doing my own thing. And I love soap operas because I love the kind of exaggerated, almost, the dreamlike, sort of surreal aspect of it, and also the non-linearity of storytelling. And I think it's also, that idea of low theory and in popular places. And so it was fun. I just had a lot of artists who were friends who kind of played many roles, including evil gallerists, so creepy collectors, these kind of really not to they were exaggerated characters, but very familiar. And I just have a lot of footage, I think there were a couple of performances that I did around Bushwick where there were live sessions where people could come and read out a script and play the role of whatever these different characters were, and people really got into it. So it was really kind of exciting. But I never put a film together, and that was never the point. It was more about the process of that 1 year where the curatorial wasn't really about an institution with white walls or an alternative to that, but really just going into film and theater and performance and kind of navigating that space. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, actually. And I have a trailer. This was just in, artist studios. I filmed around artist studios. That's me breaking a painting on a collector's head, or bizarre little setups. We just filmed in and around New York. And I think there were a lot of different relationships that kind of stemmed from that, again, making this with people who were around Bushwick at that point. And I think I may not get into a couple of things here because of time constraints, but I want to maybe leave with one of the projects that I'm currently, just ended, but it's actually something that came together post Me Too. So this kind of pushed me into the realm of the digital space, as well as a way of bringing together a lot of different voices that were working to kind of speak out against a lot of abuses, financial, sexual, and also, workspace harassment that was happening in the art world in India in particular. And so there were a lot of artists that were called out by an anonymous Instagram account in 2018, and post there was a defamation case that was also filed against that account by an artist named Subodh Gupta. And the post that spoke of his involvement in having abused some of certain individuals would then had to be removed by court order. And so since then, around that time as well, along with a fellow artist who was living in Delhi, but from Germany, Arnika Aldag, and I had started something called Pact of Silence, How to Break It. And it was essentially trying to see what it would mean to collectivize and also create support systems for those art workers and culture workers based in that very particular context of the art world in India, to really speak about, like the system of abuse and the complicity and of others in creating this kind of an environment. And for me, it's actually really, I'm not trying to tie up anything, but so it was a real shift from going into this space where I study at an auction house, where I really understood the nature of the beast, so to speak, right? Like what kind of control the art market has. And it was very instrumental in providing a space for this sort of, capitalistic, legacy oriented male artist figure. And then artists like Subodh were really doing well at that point as well, when I was just, a student, and it was the bubble of 2008 that kind of crashed the markets, but it had propped up a lot of these artists. And that kind of power that was lent by the market, really just my relationship to it, and like through those years and coming to this point where it's exactly the understanding of that beast and working in these spaces that led to this kind of anonymous coming together of a lot of different voices to speak against that. So this invisible infrastructure of whisper networks and those of us sort of functioning in some other kind of infrastructure of voices, that still exists. And we did have to close the project, but because I guess it's been we've just had to figure out how to let go and move in a different kind of direction with that work. And I think that is where I am, a pause at this moment, because it's been an intense couple of years. It's been an intense relationship with the art world. There are many ways in which I've navigated that space as queer and femme, and also coming through that to acknowledging my own queerness much later in my life. And so I think it's the shifting of friendships and relationships within collectivities, from Saucy to artists that I worked with in creating that film, to the many anonymous voices in its that I did encounter during Me Too and after that. So I really believe in pause as well, as a radical kind of gesture at the moment, to see what this phase can lead to, in what that informs me as I go forward. So I'll leave it at that, I think, because we're short on time, and I'd love to see if there were any responses or questions. So yeah, I'll probably stop sharing the screen as well. Sorry. Yeah. Share.
Thank you, Meenakshi.
Sorry, there's a lot. Yeah. I think I had a few more things, but then there's, I'd just rather have like some interaction as well, because those. Yeah.
It's always tricky on Zoom, but yeah, that was a wonderful presentation. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Meenakshi? Or Garima, if you had any questions or anything that you would like to do for the next few minutes?
Yeah, I think I would like to open up a little bit of room for questions. I've been, I teach, so I've been leaving a lot of room for awkward pauses and awkward silences. So probably even just giving a minute to see if anybody has questions. please feel welcome to put it in their chat if they want. It's 12:44, so we can wait till 12:45. Otherwise, I'll go and ask questions that I have for Meenakshi, but I would love if anybody has questions. Okay, I guess I'll break the awkward pause. Yeah, and if anybody has any comments, please, if you don't feel comfortable just talking about it, please feel free to have it in the chat. Keep the chat loud is what I tell my students as well. So Meenakshi, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's been really great. I mean, you know, I've known you, but it's really great to see your practice, or just like a span of, it's like weird to think about like you presenting projects that are like 3 years ago and then 10 years ago, and to see that span. And one thing that came up for me a lot was uncertainty in almost all of those, with the pact of silence that you were talking about, and then you were also talking about the project empty space, and that all the threads that was commonality for me at least was uncertainty, and how you were talking about it as a notion of without. But I wonder, how do you navigate that uncertainty? Because is it like a certain kind of a Zen space that you're like, it's a space of without? Or what does uncertainty bring up for you, especially as somebody who thinks a lot about uncertainty?
Yeah. That's a really good question. But I don't think, none of us live in a world where we're told like what we actually feel is okay to be felt, right? So you're always fighting, a system that tells you that a system that creates homelessness, unemployment, anxiety, hyper productivity that is and the sense of positivity and hope, and all of these things that have never really that's directly related to this sort of capitalist realism, like as Mark Fisher speaks about, like this very everything is in a way also co-opted. Anything against it feels co-opted. So the only thing to stay with is this constant practice of trying to stay true to what you feel that is supposed to be wrong, that like you're not supposed to feel, like you're not supposed to feel uncertain, you're not supposed to feel scared about where the money's going to come from, or and at the same time you're also a part of this world. So for me, I think, as I said, my positionality also as an upper caste woman, an upper middle class woman as well, having that access is something that has given me a little bit more of a structure, and like this automatic kind of less, you go to university, then you go to America, and then as a aspirational immigrant dream kind of thing that has to be fulfilled. Like my father's from that generation that always felt like everything lies in America, like just go there and you'll be saved, and then for me to actually choose to go back to India, I didn't choose it either, actually. I didn't have a visa at the end of it, and I had to just come back. But so even now that uncertainty is always there, I'm like, am I supposed to stay back here? Am I supposed to, is it better elsewhere? And I think I said, I am someone who finds the theory of lived experience as a way to say, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I think that the writing and reading other voices has kind of helped me hold on to all of this stuff that I can't really obviously articulate, and uncertainty being one of that. And it gives me anxiety all the time. Like I don't even know how to present and talk about it, but, and but yeah, I think that's also the community of the otherwise, no? Like I'm constantly thinking about how can I bring all of us who are occupying these same spaces, and sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. So I mean, yeah, I'm always in a phase of transition. And I think I'm trying to find the good in that, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's the stuff that it's great that I can articulate it. That's also a good thing, maybe, because yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but just I'm just trying to live with uncertainty is a good thing.
Thank you, Meenakshi. I appreciate the honesty because, I agree. Like, when I moved here, it was definitely like this idea of uncertainty, but somehow I always felt that, belonging to a middle class family, I can still go back home and that I would still have that structure no matter what. So, like, how that also fed into the certainty of uncertainty, or I could be okay with it. So that's really helpful. I do want to leave some room if other people have any other questions or comments. You can raise your hands or, or anything that came up for anybody, not to push you in any direction, but. Okay. Well, one more thing that I definitely wanted to ask you is something that you brought up is the feelings of have to, and I definitely is something that I think about. Like, I had this really like weird moment when I was talking to a friend, almost like it's like still etched in my mind about I was telling him like I have to go do something, and he told me like I don't have to do anything, I don't want to, and that whole idea was so um weird to me because like growing up in India, I don't sort of I have at until that point I had not thought about anything other than have to. And it's something that you brought up where you said, you have to lead this life of legibility, um, as though you still are working inside the realms of illegibility. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I'm really interested in that idea, and I appreciate you talking about this idea of that you have to lead this life, and what does that mean?
So you mean like in terms of what it means to be illegible while also being legible, like the kind of tension
Yeah,
between the two? Yeah.
yeah, and you were bringing up this idea of like you have to lead this life of legibility, but you also in the realm of illegibility.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point as she came when and Sarah Ahmed, who I refer to a lot. I mean, like her book "Living a Feminist Life" was just felt like the story of my life, and the idea of the feminist killjoy really gave me a way to, present myself. I mean, we say artist, curator. I just like being called a feminist killjoy. That's just really who I am, at the core. Like that was just something that really hit the proverbial nail on the head. And I've been really seeking out those kinds of words or descriptors, as a way also of leaving behind this very, a product of the system kind of, person that is also me. And yeah, and so there was um, I think, she talks about the idea of a feminist snap. And for me, and feminist snap is really like that moment of, she describes it as, like the breaking of a twig. So you live a certain life, you're sort of going through that, through the motions of what you think is success. And this is my work and this is my practice. It's being recognized or not recognized or whatever, on the surface of it. And then a lot of things that I was seeing outside of what was legible, like I said, the friction between a gallerist and an artist over what is a tangible, sellable artwork that has value according to the art market. And like starting from that, there was much more, right? Like you kind of go further in and then you see these are the kinds of relationships that are defining a power dynamic, and it is what is leading to this sort of, sexist, racist, casteist, like infrastructures that's just like thriving. Also, I mean, it's also illegible in a certain way. I mean, whenever there's an event or there's a hashtag, and then suddenly like the institutions respond like as if like this was not thought of before, and then it dies down. Like, look at what's happening now. I mean, it's almost like business as usual, at least in the context that I work in. And so that illegibility is always a space I want to remain in, because it can be many things. It's like the illegibility of a whisper network, right? It's always going to exist as long as like power dynamics exist, because that's how we sort of, in a way, it's that which kind of really like led to a moment of feminist snap for me. And then I just decided to participate in something like the Me Too movement, right? Because I was like, fuck this shit. And it's like, there's another kind of movement that can actually hold this, because no one cares about the Indian art world, frankly. Like, it's just like one little thing that sits there and people know a few names. But when you've lived in India and you've been there, you really see something that's just, that's so invisible to a lot of, outside, to the sort of globalized art world is choosing to ignore. And I think I think these ideas of feminist snaps have been like a nice little connecting point for me of what illegibility can do, and what, and how that can kind of sometimes become seen, like, in a way. So at one moment, like, you could see what everyone always knew existed, this kind of abuse and the level of it. And even though you people have sort of pushed it aside and they don't see it anymore, and it's kind of gone back to that realm of like, just some of us still staying with it. I think that's the relationship I'm most interested in, like what you stay with, what you leave, how you drop out, but you actually still remain, like those are interesting strategies, or I mean, those are strategies I'm interested in. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for saying that. Well, I think we're almost at the time, so I do want to open again for questions. Otherwise, we'll just say thank you so much. And I hope all of you ate alongside with Meenakshi today. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you, Garima.
Thank you, guys.
Before everybody goes, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming to our first event for Queer PALF. And we are going to, let's see, I'm just gonna share my screen. And we have a few more events. Right now, our Queer PALF marketplace is up. And so if Misha could put the links in the chat, we have some local artists, BIPOC artists, and an online pop-up marketplace for you to check out their goods. A lot of these artists have been making work since the pandemic started, and so we just wanted to create a platform for them, since a lot of those platforms have disappeared. And then this evening, we have A Letter Through Time, which is a queer and trans BIPOC only space with Lily Doe. It's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. If you'd like to register, you can register there. And then next week, we have number 2 of our Spatial Realities Lunchtime Art Series with Remy Morrison and special guest Shrita Town from Portland, who will be also in conversation. And that will be at the same time at the next Friday, and you can register there. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks.